Hey, chiropractors, welcome to Modern Chiropractic Mastery with your host, Dr. Kevin Christie, where we discuss the latest in marketing, business, and professional growth with some of the leading experts in the industry. Hey docs, welcome to another episode. And this one I'm excited. I'm interviewing Rick Mayo of Alloy, and he specializes with fitness, but we're going to dive everything into branding, and it's a lot more than you would think. A lot of times you're thinking logo and color, maybe your website, but we dive into really the deep end of branding and how he took his fitness business from 30 years into now not only licensing but franchising, and his process of rebranding and how nuanced it can be, but how important it is as well. And we try to also then bring it down into, the say chiropractic level and some of the things you need to look at when you're branding. One of the things I wanted to mention is I've had a few clients that I've worked on with rebranding, and it's not as bad as you think. And so I want you to go into this episode and start to pick out some of the things you hear. You're going to hear a lot of gems, and there's a couple of times where, maybe something you don't think applies to you, but try to look at it through the lens of a chiropractor and see how you can really get much clearer on your brand and how you can follow through with that. And don't rush it, be strategic with it, and then implement it, and you'll be amazed at what that's going to do for your practice. And we dive into a lot of things that it does do, whether it's fitness or chiropractic or physical therapy. And so a really enjoyable conversation with Rick. He speaks all over the country in this. He's doing amazing things, as you'll hear some of the amounts of franchises and locations and the licensing they're doing. It's just impressive. And I just really love the story behind their name, Alloy. And I want you to start thinking about that and how it relates to your practice. And so here is my interview with Rick Mayo. Before we get to the episode, I want to tell you about my friend and colleague, Dr. Holly Tucker of ChiroNumbers.com. Have you been in practice a few years now and you're wondering when your business will start to reward you financially? Are you so overwhelmed with the day-to-day business management that it is hard to see your success? Or are you trying to expand your team and worried about the impact to the bottom line? Dr. Holly is a certified profit-first professional and a chiropractor herself, who has managed multiple practices over the past 10 years and consults specifically on implementing the cash flow system of Profit First for chiropractors. Simplify the way you look at stats, metrics, and your own compensation through this methodology by working with someone with unique experience in your business model. Visit bit.ly/chironumbers to get your guide and video training. Download the first 2 chapters of Profit First and subscribe to her weekly 5-minute Friday series on profitability. Start to feel less overwhelmed, avoid burnout, and clean up your finances so you can focus on patient care. Again, that's bit.ly/chironumbers for access to Dr. Holly's resources. I hope you enjoy this week's podcast. All right, welcome to the show. We have Rick Mayo here, and we're going to dive into a bunch of different things, mainly strategic branding and what that actually means, because a lot of us really don't understand what it is. We may think of logos and color, and we'll touch on that, but there's a lot more to it, and Rick is going to share that with us today. But before we do that, Rick, give us a little bit about your story, and I'd love to set the backdrop of where you've come from in this and how you've ultimately in 2022 gotten to where you're at.
Well, Kevin, that's a great question. Thank you for having me on. And I will say that we are a 30-year overnight success, which means, if you just took a snapshot of our business right now, we do a lot of things, right? And we've had some pretty good successes that we're proud of. And certainly we have a lot more to go and a lot of room to grow. Mm-hmm. But we did start 30 years ago. And so it wasn't without its lumps and bumps and hard lessons along the way. So we opened in 1992, my original personal training facility. And this is just a side note. I don't even know if we've talked about this. We've always had a clinician of some sort in our business, even as far back as 1992. So it was either a physical therapist or a chiropractor. A combo of the two has always been part of our business. Now, it's not part of our business model, but certainly back in the early 90s when personal training was sort of this, I mean, people honestly didn't even understand what it was. They would call and say, what is it that you do? You know, and you have to sort of explain what a personal trainer does for people. But even back then, we knew that having a clinical piece to our business, even just a presence, right? Because it was always just a third party that paid rent and rented an office and had access to our customers and a little bit of space inside the facility to treat individuals. It always brought some legitimacy to personal training, especially early on, because it was like, man, if you had a personal trainer in the 90s when we opened, it was like having a tennis pro in the 80s. Like, it would kind of raise eyebrows at the country club, like, woo, you got this, this personal trainer, huh? It was that kind of like haha thing. And so it evolved over time. Obviously, it's become a real thing and a real industry. But we've always had a clinical presence. So opened in 92, first to market. Listen, there was no internet. I know it sounds ridiculous to half the people listening probably weren't even born in 92, but there was no internet, and there wasn't a lot of ways to see what other things were happening in the industry. But it was just a thought that wouldn't it be neat if we could take this high-end service of personal training and put four walls and a customer experience around it, right? Create something that fit, because the way that training was happening in those days was I would run to people's homes and train them there, or you would maybe subcontract out of a health club or something. You were sort of a nuisance to the club. It's a real revenue stream now, but back then it was like, yeah, just don't bother us. Go do whatever it is that you weird people to do, right? And so I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool, instead of bouncing around town? I was also in college, so it's like pretty busy. If we could, again, pull this customer experience around this high-end service and create this little boutique feel, which there weren't any boutique fitness back then. So it was a really novel idea to have this standalone that just did a one service, right? Most health clubs were big family centers with a pool, basketball, cardio, it was like the big family centers of today, but that's all that there was. So we opened and we just hit the market at the right time. Again, personal training wasn't really a thing, but thankfully it became a thing while we were in business. And so, fast forward to say 98, and we were doing a high amount of revenue certainly for 1998. And at that point, we were in around 3,000 square feet. So not a big facility, just all personal training, all one-on-one at the time, which we evolved out of that eventually. But 98 rolled around, and man, we were doing like $83,000 a month, which is about $1 million in gross revenue, which is a lot for a personal training center, certainly during those days. And then, 99 rolled around, and I was just, man, I'm the smartest guy in the world. And by the way, by now I've got kids, a wife, mortgage. It's like, I've got a real life, I'm out of college and I've got real responsibilities. And 99 rolled around, and I thought I was really smart and I had the right business model, but I had a couple of coaches that looked at me and that just thought, Rick's not that smart. We can go and open our own place, right? And of course, it's not as easy as they thought it was, but in their defense, looking back on it, I really didn't have a lot of great business systems, and I can almost understand why they would feel that way. And so they left, and then I had some other just things that were happening in the business that weren't good. It all just pointed to a lack of like guardrails and business systems, right? And so in a very short period of time, we went from $83,000 a month in revenue to $12,000 a month in revenue. So pretty big drop. And listen, I've always lived well beneath my means, but that was, if nothing else, just a bruise to my ego, right? It's like, well, geez. So I thought, well, I guess the jig is up. I can't wear sweatpants to work for the rest of my life. I'm going to have to get a real job and probably sit in a cubicle or whatever that would entail. And then I thought, you know what? I really like what we do. There's something here. Obviously, there's customers. We've been able to build a pretty decent business. I just need to do it better. And so we just decided to pull up our bootstraps, scrap our way back, and become a better business owner. Honestly, like, hey, it started with like, how do we train people? Like, if this, then that algorithms, right? For this injury, we do this. If they come in and they have this goal, we do that. And then that was extended to like, okay, customer service techniques. How do we say hello, goodbye? How do we treat people? How do we assess? All the things. And then it became sales and it became marketing. And so pretty soon, probably around the early 2000s, we had figured out how to train more than one person at one time, which made it cheaper for the consumer and a scalable business model for us that was more profitable. And so it was kind of a win-win. And we landed on what essentially was one of the highest revenue per square foot facilities in the country. And that put me on the radar for speaking and consulting. And then people would start asking for little parts and pieces of what we do. Can we buy your sales system? Can you design our workouts? And then it was like, well, instead of just selling people, custom parts and pieces, why don't we just wrap this thing up, put it on an online platform, and we'll do what we call licensing. It's a little confusing because that's an interchangeable term with franchising at times, but just imagine a white labeled version of what we're doing, powering a different brand. And we grew that to the point where, we had big contracts with really some of the biggest franchises in the world, whether it be Anytime Fitness, Gold's Gym, those type. And I'm really proud of the work that we did with those guys. And we then learned how to deploy and operationalize things in a franchise structure as well. But we ended up building that to nearly 2,500 clubs worldwide, everywhere from Dubai, India, you name it. So this little thing that I birthed in college that was nothing turned into this worldwide business, which was super cool. And then eventually that led to boutique fitness, which is what I would consider us. Boutique fitness just means like you're typically going in for one specific thing, a little bit more expensive. You're going to get better service, that type of idea. And so when boutique fitness started to approach us for help, we thought, let's, instead of powering all these other franchises that are like us now, let's just do our own franchise. So at the end of 2019, we pivoted to full franchising. That would be, for your listeners, sort of like, okay, this is McDonald's, right? It's going to have our name on the door. It's a standalone facility. It's like all of that. And of course, as we all know, 2020 was just an amazing year to be in the fitness business, as you can imagine. So not a great year to start. We kind of put things on hold once the pandemic kicked off and continue to help our licensed clubs. And then once the veil lifted a bit from this COVID fog, we pivoted back, and we've got 50 some odd sold. We'll have 10 open here at the end of the month. And things are moving right along, looking good so far.
Yeah, that's cool. And obviously a big part of being able to franchise and grow is branding. And how this even came up was Dr. Daniel Leonard, who recommended you, had talked about branding, because I actually did a rebrand for our modern chiropractic marketing company. And I did it kind of interesting. I used 99 designs, but I did the high end version of it and got the high end designers. So I definitely forked out a little bit more than some of the typical. And I narrowed it down to like 7. And then I have a Facebook group of 4,500 chiropractors. And we ran with 99 designs, you can run a poll and get feedback. And so I let my audience pick the winner out of the 7. Luckily, it was the one I liked the best as well, as far as logo and color scheme and all that.
Right.
So it was like a fun process I had. And I was really, really engaged with it. It was fun. And then around that time is when Dan had connected me with you about having you on a podcast about this, because he's always been so impressed with your branding. All right, docs, here is a new opportunity for you from Darcy Sullivan of Propel. She is our SEO specialist in helping out many chiropractors with their search engine optimization and making sure Google is finding you and getting you new patients. It's amazing how many new patients chiropractors can get and are getting when they do the SEO right and a few other things. And Darcy is offering a free SEO workshop just for chiropractors, and you can sign up for that at bit.ly/propelmcm. That is bit.ly/propelmcm, modern chiropractic marketing, right? And so check out that link, and we're going to have you go over 5 SEO secrets to owning the first page of Google without buying ads. And Darcy's going to give that free workshop, 1 hour, to really help grow your practice and start churning new patients from the ever mighty Google, which is still king in the online marketing. So check that out at bit.ly/propelmcm for the 1 hour free workshop. Hey doc, are you moving office spaces, or you're a startup with your own new space, or you're like me where you need renovations because it's starting to look a little worn after about 10 years like ours is? Crossfield's Chiropractic Office Design is here to elevate you wherever you're at, and they're going to help maximize your space and flow. They're going to really help attract and retain patients, and this is going to have a great ROI on your investment when you increase that patient experience. So check out Chiropractic Office Designs by Crossfields, and we have a special link for modern chiropractic marketing listeners, and that is www.chiropracticofficedesign.com/Kevin-Christie. And with that, you're going to have discounts. We're going to have direct links to a mega bundle of free resources, and you can check them out, and you can get 15 of our most popular floor plans, 5-phase checklist for a startup office, 5-point designer checklist to evaluate your current office image. And there's 30% off on all online products when you go to www.chiropracticofficedesign.com/Kevin-Christie. So my first question to you is, what falls under branding? Obviously we know logo, color scheme, but what are some of the other things that really fall under a strong brand?
I think it's any and all things, right? I mean, I really think
Mhm.
if you want to think of branding, it's every customer interaction. It's your,
Mhm.
if you're running, advertising, it's your ads. It's how does the customer feel 3 years later? Like,
Mhm.
we talked a little bit pre-recording, like a brand is nothing until you back it up with something, right? If you look at some other great brands, historically speaking,
Mhm.
like a Starbucks, I mean, that has nothing to do with coffee. And then, what does it really become about is kind of what you deliver on, right?
Mhm.
So if you don't mind, if you'll indulge me, I'll kind of describe the process that I think you should use when you go to rebrand, right?
Yep.
I
Mhm.
think for you guys, it's easy. It's kind of like fitness, where like once you know what, like if I understood exactly what your clinic was really doing in market, I think I could duplicate that for other clinics.
Mhm.
But I think there's a couple ways to go about it. So it all starts with something. It's a concept that we call jobs to be done, and it's based on famous Harvard business professor named Clay Christensen, and he
Mhm.
wrote a great book called Innovator's Dilemma. And I took one of his online courses because Harvard has an amazing suite of online courses that you can just cherry pick and take whatever you want. And they really do a good job of making it feel exactly like you're in a Harvard classroom course, right? You have to have group participation, you have to answer questions, you can raise your hand. I mean, it's amazing. And so I took this course, and as part of it, they had a section in there called Jobs to be Done. And the way that he described how to think about it was through a story where he had also a private enterprise company, and they were hired to help Burger King sell more milkshakes. And so he talks about in the video about how Burger King had done all the traditional things that they should do, right? They polled the audience. They asked them, what they wanted, and it was like, "Oh, make it more visky. It needs to have more viscous, and it needs
Mhm.
to have more cookies or more chocolatey or vanilla or whatever those things are." And they responded to all those things, and it didn't move the sales of their milkshakes whatsoever. So they hired Clay Christensen's firm, and they came in and they used this lens of jobs to be done. And so they parked themselves outside of Burger King restaurants, and they simply observed who was going into the restaurant, what were they buying, what were they doing when they bought those things. And as it turned out, that over half of the milkshakes were sold before 8 a.m., which was
Hmm.
surprising, right? I mean, I guess that's
Yeah.
America for you, like you're grabbing a milkshake for
Yes.
breakfast, but it sounds odd to like health minded people. But when you look at, okay, jobs to be done, so they would then observe these people, and then they went back to those restaurants, and then they would confront these people, milkshakes in hand, and say, "Pardon me, what job did you hire that milkshake to do?" Which is kind of an odd question, especially if you're
Mhm.
on the way to work. And as it turns out, then people would, it's an odd question, they'd say, "Okay, well, let me reframe this. Last time you had this job to be done, what other products did you hire?" And they would say, "Well, last time I hired a banana, right? But
Mhm.
take my take my advice, never hire bananas, right? They're messy, they're sticky, they get all over your hands. They're gone by 10 a.m. So you're going to be starving before lunch, right? Bananas are no good. If you don't tell my wife,
Mhm.
once a week I hire donuts, but they're messy, they get on my hands. I feel so guilty, I'll probably never hire donuts again." And he goes through this laundry list of other things. And he says, the job to be done in this case was every person that was buying those milkshakes before 8 a.m., which was the bulk of people, all had one job to do. And that was they all had a long, boring commute to work. And it was about 20 minutes on average. And
Mhm.
so all the other, things you think about, like I got a bagel, it's like, okay, I got to spread some jam on there because it's so dry. And then I'm
Right.
steering with my knees and the phone rings and we have a crisis, right? It's like, so like this milkshake, it fits perfectly in my cup holder.
Yeah.
It's takes me 20 minutes to suck it up through the straw. Keep in
Mhm.
mind, it wasn't a healthy breakfast. It was
Mhm.
like I need something that just
Yep.
sits in my stomach and holds me over until lunch, and it does that job perfectly. So when you start to look at your product or service through the lens of that jobs to be done, it becomes more about, in the case of the Burger King milkshakes, you're not just in competition with other Burger King milkshakes. You
Mhm.
are by default then in competition with coffee, bagels, donuts, bananas, right? And
Yep.
if you were, how would you change how you took that product to market? So if you think about the first step in branding, it's to identify jobs to be done. So it's a bit of an exercise to go
Mhm.
through, but I think it's an important one. And when you look at that, I think it will open your eyes to what is it that you're really doing. Like maybe in chiropractic care, it's like, yes, we're all trying to get people pain free and to be healthy, but in a
Mhm.
lot of ways, aren't we raising self confidence, right? In
Mhm.
some ways, if we can just make people understand that if you do some of these activities, you're not going to be hurt. By default, just doing those activities will make them feel better. So
Yep.
maybe you're just building confidence. Maybe it's there's a lot of other ways to reskin. Same thing in fitness. Like
Mhm.
we're really building a community. We become like a third place. It's like home, work, and us. You could even argue maybe a second place if people are working from home. So it's just home
Mhm.
and us. And so that would then by default put fitness in competition with country clubs, right? Book
Mhm.
club, golf. I mean, all the things that you could get together with a group of friends and do are
Yep.
by default in competition with us. So we need to build a machine then that does that job as good or not, if not better than
Mhm.
everyone else, because best shape of your life would be what we think we do, but it's not necessarily what our customers think we do, right? Our
Yeah, and
average customer stays 3 years and it's like their fitness is, we all know fitness is an up and
Mhm.
down journey over a
Yep.
lifetime. We're just helping them manage that, right?
Mhm. And have you found that group fitness has added a layer of camaraderie and people have like that social, it could be really their only enjoyable social interaction for the day for some people.
100%. And so,
Yeah.
we're targeting a customer avatar that's 45 to 65 years old.
Mhm.
They have money because personal training is more expensive. And to your point, we're training up to 6 people with one coach. And we've
Yep.
evolved into that business model. We have technology to make that feel and look
Mhm.
like real personal training. And it is. But there is that community aspect that's been added by putting a group of six together as opposed to just one-on-one. And it's very dynamic, right? So it's
Mhm.
like, all right, well, if we're building community, then what's the machine that we need to build, right? So
Right.
that's the next step is like, okay, what kind of customer experiences do we need to put around the fitness that
Mhm.
build the thing that people are here to do, which is community? So then you build the soft touch things like, okay, every time we have a new person in the group, they're introduced to the other people in the group. Like it has
Yep.
to be done. It has to be done a certain way that brings those barriers down and those walls so that they get to know
Mhm.
and they get integrated into our community quicker. So there's a lot of things that you can do then to build the customer experience around what the real job to be done is.
Yep.
Then the next step is like, okay, now you have to fully integrate. And that goes back to your original question, what's branding? It's everything from the ads that you put out. It's the first exposure people have to you. Our average stay for customers 3 years, all the way through to 3 years later, right?
Mhm.
That's putting together, integrating all of the parts and pieces, all based on the jobs to be done and the customer experience. It all
Yep.
has to be put together that way. And then ultimately you have a brand, right, on
Mhm.
top of that. And then you become known for those things, whatever those things are. Like,
Yep.
I don't think Starbucks has the best coffee. They're just known for good customer service, right? I mean,
Mhm.
there's things that they do really well. And so like one of the things I'm proud of is we've got people all over the world that have our logo tattooed on their body based on the results they've had from our business. It's like that's a brand, right?
Mhm.
That's when you're recognized as a brand. So I think when you look at branding, I know that's a long answer, but there's a
Yep.
4-step process. Identify the job to be done, right?
Mhm.
Spend some time on that really. Then what do you need to build as a customer experience around that job to be done?
Yep.
How do you fully integrate that through every step of your business? And then at the top, now you have a brand that's known
Mhm.
for what you are and what it is in your community, wherever that brand is. For us, it's
Yep.
worldwide. For you guys, it
Mhm.
might be just in your local market, but it's still
Mhm.
really, really important that you do that.
Yeah, it is. And, and to touch on it, because I've had this, multiple episodes where I hammer on a lot of chiropractors spend too much time with patients and don't charge enough, right? And so they think they're in a time economy, but they're really in a results economy. And you got to get clear on what people are coming to you for. And I did this exercise. Have you read the book Obvious Atoms? It's a little,
I have not.
yeah, it's from like 1916. It's not even really a book. It was kind of a editorial that was put into a book, but long story short, is this guy who was in advertising, and his name was Oliver Adams. But all he did was target the obvious things in his ads about a company, and he would hammer that in, and that would become like kind of the brand and super successful. And we boiled it down, and I've started talking to some of my chiropractors about this. Is like, what are some of the obvious benefits of going to a chiropractor? And it's certain things like you might be able to get an appointment right away, right? So orthopedists and primary cares, it's like 2 or 3 or 4 weeks before you get an appointment. You can get in within a couple of days for most chiropractors. You don't have to wait an hour in the waiting room. We don't even call our waiting room a waiting room. We call it a reception area because we don't want them to wait. Obviously they can get evaluated and treated on the same day. And so there's all these little obvious things, and we can be very efficient, and people can come in for 15 minutes or so and get results. And so that would be kind of a job to be done, right? Like that person that
Hmm.
has shoulder issue and they want it fixed quickly and efficiently so they can play golf, right? And you got to serve that job to be done. Your job is not to spend 45 minutes with them unless it's needed, right? Like there's certain scenarios
Right.
it is. So I'm,
Well, and quite
and,
honestly, I would pay for speed,
yeah.
meaning I would actually, as a consumer, and I know I'm more savvy because I think about these things,
Mhm.
at great length, and you do too. I would pay you more if I didn't have to spend as much time with you. That's not because I don't like you, and you're not a
Yeah.
good-looking guy, and I'm sure you're really nice, right? And you treat patients, and your office is amazing. I don't care. I'm busy.
Yep.
If you can get me in and out in 15 minutes, I will actually pay more for that,
Yep.
right? And so that's to your point, though. I think
Mhm.
we get it twisted, and it's like, oh, well, no, they need time with me, FaceTime. It's like, well, they don't.
Mhm.
I mean, it's important how they feel while they're there, and there's little
Yeah.
tricks to that too. Like touch somebody physically on the arm, the perceived time spent with you goes up by 20%.
Yep.
So let's bake in some little things, right?
Yep.
Tricks of the trade, if you will. But I'll pay you for speed. If you can
Yep.
get me, if you can get me in and out of there this Friday afternoon, and my golf game can feel a smidge better on Saturday, I'll pay more for that.
Yeah. And so and I had a doctor on here, Dr. Winchester. We talked about clinical efficiency and how to get there, because that's really the job to be done in most people's eyes. Yeah, there's going to be some patients that want time, but we're like, our practice is named HealthFit, Chiropractic and Sports Recovery. And we're more sports chiropractic. And we're really tweaking our brand from a patient experience standpoint, is like, how can we get really efficient with the chiropractic manipulation, some soft tissue work, and then some really strategic rehab, and get them in efficiently treated and get the results. And that'll be part of our unique process, right?
And that becomes your brand, right? You get
Yep.
results quickly with less fuss.
Yeah,
People should
definitely.
actually pay more for that.
Exactly. And that's what I'm trying to change. And that is a branding type thing. So thanks for helping me out with that.
Yeah, 100%.
So what was some of your process of the strategic branding, as it goes to more of like, okay, your website looks amazing. I love your logo and color scheme. Like, what was some of the process? Did you hire an outside firm? Like, what were some of the moving parts of that?
Yeah, and listen, I mean, at the time that we went to a branding through a branding process, we had a pretty decent sized company. So I don't
Mhm.
expect, the listeners, if they're a family owned sports chiropractic center, they might not want to go to these links, but it'll just give you ideas of what you could do.
Yep.
So when we started the process, we needed a name, and we needed a trademarkable name, meaning we had a big national brand worldwide actually, and we
Mhm.
needed something that could be trademarked. And so we took our ideas and everything to this firm out of San Francisco, and they're
Mhm.
called Zen, like Zin, right? All they do is naming. That's it. And it
Mhm.
was expensive. It was probably like $35,000 just for a name. Now, mind you, you're getting nothing else. You're not getting logos. You're not getting any branding at all. And so we went through a 6-week exercise with them to come up with something that had meaning, and it would
Mhm.
speak to what we do in personal training. And so, when they kind of whittle it down to maybe 2 or 3 choices at the end,
Mhm.
all free for trademark and whatnot. And so Alloy was the final, one of the finals, and I actually really didn't like it. I was like, it's one of those things where the beauty is in the simplicity,
Mhm.
and that's one of our core values, is to keep it simple, and that's like one of the hardest things to do. And I don't know why that was lost on me in the process, but I remember thinking, like, this is the dumbest name ever. Like, I could have thought of this, which is absolutely not true.
Mhm.
Because when you look at the meaning of alloy, literally the Google definition, shoot, it's in my office right in front of me here. It says
Mhm.
a metal made by combining 2 or more solid elements, especially to give greater strength. So if you think about something that's stronger, if you bring things together, right, then it's
Mhm.
like, oh, well, that would work for B2B. So, like, let's say
Right.
franchise to franchisee. And then it also works all the way through from the franchisee to their local customer base, right?
Yep.
Like, everybody knows you're better off if you have a coach in your life and someone holding you accountable. So it worked B2B and B2C as well. And I'm like, oh, brilliant. Well, then we took the name and the idea behind the name, and we took it to a local branding firm. I'm in Atlanta, and so we took it to a local branding firm in Atlanta, boutique, very high end. We probably spent twice that much more just to get the brand made. And it was like fonts, colors. The logo is actually two pillars leaning on each other. That's the
Mm-hmm.
idea of the logo. Um, the tagline, "Stronger Together," which has been kind of played out since, but I think Hillary used it for her campaign in
Mm-hmm.
the Hillary sort of Trump runoff, and that diluted it a bit. But I mean, in the fitness space, we have the trademark on that as well. And if you think
Mm-hmm.
about what Alloy means, "Stronger Together" makes a lot of sense, right? It's like,
Yeah.
if we work together, whether it's me with your business B2B or
Mm-hmm.
you with me as your coach, business to consumer, it's going to be better, if we're stronger
Mm-hmm.
together. So that was it. And I mean, it was a whole like imaging, fonts again,
Mm-hmm.
taglines, everything baked into what it turns out to be a really simple brand, but a lot goes into taking a complex idea and making it simple.
Yeah, and when I heard and saw the name Alloy, I thought of strength. Like this kind of just popped in my head with that. So that makes a lot of sense. And obviously, then it goes from your website looks great. Like just you go to your website, the Alloy website, and it's just like, wow, okay, this is a real deal thing. And a lot of chiropractors, again, aren't multi-million dollar businesses and national brands and franchising, but you can do so much with less money on websites and take your time on naming a practice and coming up with a logo. Like you really can do a lot and then work your way up as you go. And you kind of mentioned earlier as far as rebranding. I've been fortunate enough to work with a few chiropractors to help them rebrand, and it went very successful. A lot of chiropractors I talk to get concerned about that, like, oh, it seems like a lot of work, and is it worth it, and this and that. What are your thoughts on rebranding as you grow and you're something different now than maybe your practice was 15 years ago?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really important. It was obvious for us because we had people saying, "Hey, what do I call this thing?"
Yep.
And before we rebranded to Alloy, we were just a local gym name, right? We had a few
Mm-hmm.
gyms and we were doing a lot of consulting, but you didn't need a brand name for consulting. People just knew us from the industry. But
Yep.
when we started like deploying exactly what we do in other people's
Mm-hmm.
businesses, it was like, what do we call this thing again?
Yep.
Right. And certainly with a franchise, when you have it on the front door. So I think it is really important as for a refresh. And I think you don't do it willy nilly, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you do it when it's appropriate. And I think you just need, even if you kept the same name, because name is not all brand, it's really not, right?
Yep.
It's everything else around it. So even if you kept your name, if you thought you had a relevant name, you just
Mm-hmm.
wanted to rebrand in general, that has a lot to do with, again, what's the job of what we do? How can we speak to that through our website? What kind of imaging then does that need? Who's our
Mm-hmm.
customer avatar typically? So you pull all the hard data and then you figure out that job to be done and then you build it around that. So it's well worth it. And I think when you don't know a lot about it and all you hear is effort and maybe expense, you're going to be inclined to say it's not important. You're going to tell
Mm-hmm.
yourself that, right? Like, oh, it doesn't really matter. I mean, people in my community already know me. It's like, it matters because in this day and age, like if your website doesn't look good mobily, like,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, you're dead in
Ah,
the water, right? So
yep.
there's just so many little things that I know that you're probably teaching and preaching
Mm-hmm.
all the time, but they are very, very important because at the end of the day, like, again, if you don't know the job to be done and you're just claiming that we do chiropractic care for
Mm-hmm.
athletes, it's like, well,
Yeah.
every other chiropractor in your market is going to say the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
So when I land on your site or when I look at any of your materials, what does it speak to, right? Does it
Mm-hmm.
speak to that, what I really want from you,
Yeah.
which is the best done in the shortest amount of time to get me back to function or things outside of the clinic that I like to do in my life?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's really important. And I think you should be constantly reviewing it and updating it as you go. And it doesn't mean a wholesale change every time, but if you have a tired old brand, it's definitely working against you.
Yeah, I tweaked. We used to be HealthFit, and I did trademark HealthFit back in 2009. I was like, what's the word? And for me, it was great because we were health and we worked a lot with fit people, fitness, and sports. So I really liked it, and I was fortunate enough to be able to get it as a copyrighted trademark, and so we have that. And we used to be our tagline was chiropractic and sports medicine, but then I kind of really liked sports recovery better because that was when we have a whole body cryotherapy sauna. We got the,
Right.
Norman Tech recovery. We got all these different things. And it's like, I kind of like that. And so we tweaked the logo. We had to do a lot of things with it, and it wasn't that bad. It was pretty easy. And so don't be afraid to do the rebrand. Another thing that we've done, because again, I'm exiting patient care in a week. And so we've been really trying to build our practice not on me anymore, not on my name, not on my personal name. And so we've developed the HealthFit approach, which is our model of care, and it's on our website. And that's what people are getting. And so we're trying to get a little uniformity around that for our doctors that we have here. And so far, so good. And it's a work in progress for sure, but we are trying to build that brand as a practice.
Yeah, and I think that's smart. I mean, certainly in a lot of the situations that your listeners are in, they do have a practice, and there's nothing wrong with that. But at some point, you are trading time for money. So if you do want to level up and own a
Mhm.
clinic that can run without you, right? Even if it's for more free time or actually to grow the business and open another clinic, whatever that is, you do have to make the brand about something other than yourself, right? Which can be difficult because you probably started the business on your own merit and your ability
Mhm.
to treat patients and get them healthy. And so to be able to have other, clinicians sit in
Yep.
that seat and run your play, so to speak, and do it with the same integrity and all of that is
Mhm.
it's not for wimps,
Yep.
building that. But if you can, then you can really scale. And whatever that
Mhm.
means, you can do a different business like you have and help other, clinicians in your market, or you can, open another one, or you can have more free time or whatever. But I think that's the next logical step. That's when branding really comes into play, right? Because then it's not just you, with your name on the shingle out front, and then that's, you're carrying the entire
Yep.
business. Again, nothing wrong with that, but if you
Mhm.
feel yourself being pulled to want more than that, brand's going to be a lot more important.
Yeah, and you actually touched on a word that was a perfect segue to kind of our last little topic here. Was you mentioned scale, and I think a lot of people hear that word. I'll just relate it to chiropractors, and they think, well, I don't want to open up 150 locations. They think that's scale, but I try to tell them is like, look, scale could be having multiple doctors. Scale can mean seeing more people, right? Like scaling your marketing, scaling your branding, get it out there and get more people in there. And so a lot of chiropractors will reach out to me about scaling and they really don't know what it is. And when I dive into the basics of it, it's like, oh, okay, I probably got to start there. How has branding really fueled your scalability?
Yeah, I think if anything, it just speaks directly to our consumer, who we are and what we can do. Like, who
Mhm.
are we in their life, right?
Yeah.
And I think then the brand becomes the champion, not me and not the players in the brand. I mean, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. Like, it's like you could be the Dallas Cowboys, and you might say they're America's team. It's still a team made up of players. Don't get me wrong, and
Yeah.
they're very important, right? But eventually, you would like the brand to supersede any of the players. You really would,
Mhm.
so that it can stand alone. And if you want to talk legacy or, again, any of those things, that's what you're really talking about when you talk about scale. Like you said, it could literally be just, increasing your patient load by 1/3 by being more efficient, right? All of those things. But you want the brand to supersede your individual brand,
Yeah.
ideally. Like, unless you're a trainer to the stars or something crazy, right? It just makes more sense. And if you ever did decide that you wanted to exit, or that you wanted to spend less time there or what have you, it's going to be much more
Yeah.
impactful if the customers are, again, they're glued to the brand itself,
Mhm.
not necessarily the team or the players. It's more the brand on the helmet, so to speak. That's what you want to shoot for. And it's not easy, but like, if you, again, through the coaching that you're giving, it's like, pay attention to all little things, go through the
Mhm.
process we talked about earlier. What's the job? What do I need to build? How do I fully integrate? That becomes my brand over time. Then you've got something. And even if you then choose to still work in your business every day because your favorite thing in the world is treating patients, you still have a better, stronger business if you have a strong brand in front of it, right?
Yep.
Even if it's just you and it will always be you, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's still a stronger business if you've got that strong branding around that service.
That's perfect. I'm so glad you said that because a lot of people was like, oh, well, it's just always going to be me as well. You can still have a better business. And then I think your Cowboys analogy was perfect because we know like there's been many, many years for quite a while now. They haven't been that good. So they haven't had that many good players.
I'm from
And,
Dallas. I'm keenly aware. They're
yeah.
terrible.
And yet they're on Monday Night Football 14 times a year. So it's part of their
Right?
brand.
Right. And the players change, come and
Yeah.
go, but the
Yeah.
the brand stands. And so Listen, I mean, we don't know what tomorrow brings. Maybe if you're a clinician and you're treating 90% of the patients and you get hit by a bus, it's like, what happens to the business, you know?
Hmm.
Well, you might say, well, I'm taken care of because I have catastrophic insurance or whatever. That's great. But I mean, still, it's a business. Like that is a living, breathing entity in and of itself. So it's the business is bigger than you, it should be. And you should treat it like its own entity. And you have to take care of it. And you have to, you have to love it and you have to like, you discipline it and you have to like put some lipstick on the pig every now and then, which would be a rebrand, right? And that thing is a self-sustaining entity in and of itself, and you should treat it as such. It's not you, you're not it ultimately, right? And it should eventually be bigger than just you, ideally.
I love it. I really appreciate your time today. We have a lot of chiropractors that also have gyms and fitness aspects there. So I think they can learn a lot and look into what you have going on. So how could they find about Alloy or I know you do a lot of speaking, things like that. How can they reach out?
Yeah, listen, just alloyfranchise.com is the best way to get a hold of me. There's a form you can fill out there
Mhm.
and shoot me if you have. I'm all over social media as well. I mean, you can just find me at any imaginable platform from TikTok to Facebook and everything in between. So to reach out, if you have any questions. And we have sold franchises to clinicians because they're
Yep.
like, hey, I'm going to do 3 clinics in the Greenville market as an example.
Hmm.
And they've all been chiropractors, just
Yep.
by chance, but really good operators that have purchased, clinics, or maybe they want to open multiples or a centrally located clinic. And then fitness makes a great back scratching service, right?
It does. It
And it's
does.
almost the way that we program, it's very scientific and, it's all
Hmm.
personal training. So you can accommodate injuries and all the things that you
Yep.
guys typically see in the clinic. So it's a nice continuation after treatment to say, okay, well, I'm going to hand you off here. And then you've got a brand behind it. And we're giving you all the bandwidth of the franchise. So reach out if you have any questions about it. Even if you're running your own fitness business, like you talked about Daniel, who's become
Yep.
a friend. He's a great guy. He just has his own private brand, and he got with us while we were still licensing, and we're powering that, for
Yep.
him from workouts and stuff. But he's doing great. So there's a
Mhm.
lot of ways to go about it. But I love the marriage of fitness and clinic. So reach out anytime.
Perfect.
alloyfranchise.com.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
That is it for this week's episode. But before you leave, check us out at www.modernchiropracticmarketing.com for all kinds of free resources such as blogs and the podcast episodes. We've got online courses. You can check out the Chiropractic Success Academy there, which is an amazing online coaching system for you at a very affordable monthly rate. There's a free online course on the modernchiropracticmarketing.com website, so check that out. If you're interested in some one-on-one coaching, we can do that as well. We have all kinds of resources for you there, and we would also truly appreciate if you could rate and review this podcast if you're getting valuable information out of it. I can't thank you enough, and we'll see you next week.